The question is, do we just want to other people? You choosing like what you try? Yeah. You choosing right?
I did join with the computer audio. But I'm on the.
That's okay. There's a proposal to get New York emergency vehicles to switch to European.
We're going to get going. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being with us. This is the Land Use, Housing and Zoning Committee of Manhattan Community Board 5. My name is Leila Logiziko, I'm the chair. Tonight we have two items on the agenda. One is an action item and the other one is an item for review that will become an action item, but this is coming from the city of New York. And therefore we have a little bit more time. It's also a very robust proposal. So let me tell you what is on the agenda. One Penn Plaza, this is for minor modifications. And the second item is the city of Yes for economic opportunity. And this is a presentation by the Department of City Planning. Few words about how the meeting is going to run. I think everybody is familiar with our format, but the applicants will have an opportunity to give a full and uninterrupted presentation. Concluding this presentation, members of the committee will have an opportunity to ask questions. Then we will move to the public session of the meeting where members of the public will have an opportunity to ask questions and make comments to the applications. And then we will move to business session. During business session, only members of the committee are allowed to discuss the matter. We will make a motion, take a vote. This vote will be forwarded to the full board of Community Board 5, which meets on the second Thursday in December, and I believe this is December 11. The vote of the committee will be presented to the full board, and the full board will take a vote. The vote of the full board becomes the official position of Manhattan Community Board 5. This position will then be forwarded to the relevant agencies, the Department of City Planning, the City Planning Commission, and the elected officials. So let's jump right in, because although we have only two items, they are robust. We start tonight's meeting with an application by Vornado for One Penn Plaza. This is for minor modifications to a privately owned public space. And we have the team of applicants with us tonight on Zoom. Thank you so much. Judy, I guess I turn it to you. And if you want to introduce the team, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Leila, and thank you to the whole Land Use, Housing and Zoning Committee for seeing us tonight, in this busy holiday season. We have with us tonight our Land Use Council, Jeff Mulligan, our landscape architect, Melissa Howe, and from MDAS Architects, Stephanie Cuevas and Mike Zaborski. And I'm Judy Kessler from Vornado, and it's been my privilege to be working on all things Penn and One Penn Plaza since, for 9 years, and working with the community board. If you go to the first page, the map page, I know you all are, so familiar with the area, but for context, One Penn Plaza occupies the full block from 7th to 8th Avenue and 33rd to 34th Street, except for the out parcel occupied by the Long Island Railroad MTA entrance on 34th Street near 7th Avenue. Today, we are here to talk to you about One Penn Plaza and our current application with City Planning for open air cafes, kiosks, and a minor plan adjustment to the West Plaza. This site plan shows in the color that we have over 1 acre of pop space that generated bonus floor area when the building was built in 1972. In 2019, 47 years after construction, we came to you in a ULURP process that included bringing all of the pop spaces up to modern standards as best as possible. Our property now has, or will very soon have, over 700 public seats, several hundred tables, 40 trees, and numerous other amenities and features for the public to enjoy. Plus, I want to note that it's now much safer and more enjoyable as a result of many things, but including the nighttime closures that were granted with your help, and also in the East and West plazas, and also our dramatic lighting upgrades. So if you go to the next slide. So before we get into the details of today's actions, we want to just take you on a quick tour around the property. So, you know, as you can see, our actual North Plaza photo on 34th Street brings to life the vitality and permeability that was promised in the rendering in the upper left that we showed to you in 2019. And then if we go inside in the next slide. So as you all requested in 2019, we have provided direct access to Penn Station that is fully accessible and an uplifting experience. And recently it was just a joy for us to tour a few disability advocate colleagues through these improvements with automatic doors, plenty of ramps, and the new and highly maintained elevator down into the station. Now if we go further east, this is looking south from 34th Street. The East Plaza is wrapping up its work, both the paving and the retail work. The retailers will open by the spring, but the paving will be complete and the full landscaping, you know, should be complete by year end, and any of the remaining construction materials, you know, removed so that people have full access to it. Then going around south to 33rd Street, the South Plaza should also be open by year end, since our sidewalk bridge will be coming down. This is, you're now looking, you're inside the plaza behind the scaffolding, but as you can see that that this is ready for furniture and people to enjoy it, you know, as soon as the scaffolding comes down. Our actions today concern both the South Plaza and the West Plaza. So the West Plaza is the largest plaza at over or about 24,000 square feet. And it suffered from its significant height above the sidewalk and lack of visibility into its western areas. The problematically raised additional center area that's was raised above this height even. You know, and now it has this new lighting sculpture and bench seating feature, and now it's a more welcoming and vibrant space. And then the scaffolding on the right also gets, you know, removed. You know, we wanted to deliver all of this sooner, but our scaffolding and delivering of the POPs has taken longer because in response to Local Law 97, we have undertaken and are now completing a full glass replacement project, going from original single pane to triple pane IGU windows throughout the whole building. And it just, you know, we had to have the scaffolding up. And then finally, just a quick image of our sidewalk project, which you all were involved with and helpful on, you know, which is in progress, and completing the entire block, including extending out the sidewalk into 7th Avenue, will probably take us through, you know, almost a full year, because some of the work is very complex, but always access is maintained. And now I want to turn it over to Jeff Mulligan from Kramer Levin, who will take you through our actions.
Thank you, Judy. So the two actions that are before the community board are a city planning commission chair certification for 3 cafes and 2 kiosks in the West Plaza, and 1 cafe in the South Plaza. I think you all know that the certification has a term of 3 years, at which time a new application can be filed for another 3-year term. As discussed in the application materials, the cafes and the kiosks have met all of the required findings, which include requirements relating to maximum size of the cafes and kiosks and locations within the plazas. The second action is an application for a minor or non-ULURP modification to the special permit approved by City Planning in 2019. And the minor changes are only related to the West Plaza. Now, these changes that we will show you will further enhance the usability and attractiveness of the West Plaza, and ordinarily such changes to a plaza would be done administratively at City Planning, but because there is a special permit on the plaza, a public review process is required. So before I turn it over to Mike Zaborski from the architects team, who will take you through the changes and the application, I wanted to point out that you'll see in the presentation that we have largely completed the work in the West Plaza, including the changes that are the subject of the application. For a bit of background, we began discussing the design changes with City Planning about 2.5 years ago. City Planning staff agreed that the changes would improve the accessibility to the plaza and consented to the filing of the application, but largely because of staffing shortages at City Planning, it took longer than expected for the application to be processed and referred out for public review. So in order to stay on schedule with ongoing construction work at 1 Penn, we obtained a permit from DOB for the plaza redesign, and City Planning was made aware of this filing. So it's also important to point out that if we had waited for the approvals of these minor changes before completing the plaza work, the West Plaza would still be closed to the public instead of having been open to the public earlier this year. So we thought that it was in everyone's interest to get the work done so that the West Plaza could be opened up to the public while the applications were pending at City Planning. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mike Zaborski.
Thanks, Jeff. So what I'll do is I'll just walk you through what the design changes were within the West Plaza, and also talk about the South Plaza as well. So this first slide here on the screen just outlines the location of the West Plaza. So it's on 8th Avenue and between 32nd or 33rd and 34th Streets. And we've just highlighted here essentially there's 3 things improvements that have happened. We've removed the elevated deck. There was a zone, if you remember, in this back area here, and I'll show you an existing plan of what was approved in 2019. But in this west portion of the Central Plaza, it was a raised, an additionally raised deck in that zone. So that's been removed and brought down to the main plaza level. And then there's a social seating group in the middle here that was reconfigured to allow for essentially better seating within the zone here and better delineation of where the open air cafes would occur. Additionally, more planting and more seating was able to be brought into the design. So here are some this is the rendering of the approved plaza in 2019. This is looking west, your mid plaza on the west side here, looking toward the west here. And this was that additionally raised area here. At that time, there was a ramp configuration that would lead up to the top here to allow for accessibility. But what we were able to do was to bring down the level of the plaza down to this lower level here throughout, and open the seating up so that from this mid-block area here that you could see that that's that social seating area that that we're discussing. This is a view within that social seating space looking back toward the east. This is 1 Penn, the building up above here. And you can see there's large scale trees that were able to be brought in here, as well as a combination of fixed and movable seating within the plaza. Here's a view of it at night with this light sculpture that Judy had mentioned. A view, and this is a view looking north, again, allowing access through to this area here in the west and connecting it better to the overall plaza. This is an aerial rendering of the approved design in 2019. So you can see here at the time, there was a kiosk that was shown here on the north side. This is 34th Street. That's on the bottom edge of the photograph here. And you can see within here that raised area with the trees that we'll be showing you the revisions to right now. So this is the revised plan right now that we're proposing. So there's the north kiosk remains where it is. We feel that it's important to have that so that it draws people into the plaza off of the street, provides a little bit of life. And then there's a second kiosk that is being shown here in the mid plaza to help to support food and beverage to the adjacent seating areas, draw people in within the plaza as well. You can see that the light sculptural light fixture still connects between the two streets throughout, and you can see the seating areas that are adjacent to that against one pen here. We'll go to the plans here so you can get a sense of the changes that occurred in plan. So this is the 2019 approved plan. There were two cafes that were identified at the time. Cafe A coming off of the food and beverage provider that would be off of the south end of the plaza on 33rd Street, and then Cafe B up at that upper area. You can see here the ramping that I was describing earlier of the way that accessibility would get up to this upper level here. And at the time, there were two kiosks that were tucked in the back end of the west portion of the plaza here. So when I click over to the new plan here, it shows that that kiosk is centrally located now in the middle, and it's again visible from both streets. We've maintained that north kiosk where it was originally shown. Again, the importance of that drawing people in off of the street. And we were able to have it so that that whole central area now is all at that same elevation, which we think is very important. It just opens up the space. And then right now the proposal is to have the three open air cafes that would each be toward the periphery of and the edges of the plaza, and be supported by each their own food vendor, one within Pen 1, which is off to the right-hand side over here, and then you have a southern one and a northern one. They're all within the size limitations that are permitted. They're actually a lot smaller than the maximum size allowable. And we feel that it's kind of equally distributed around the plan, so that there's a good blend of where the seating can occur throughout. This is what that plan would look like in the seating configuration, with I think a good distance and clearances around the other seating areas to allow for circulation throughout. And then we'll go over here to the South Plaza as well, just to show you the location of the South Plaza and the proposed open air cafe there as well. So the South Plaza is highlighted here in red, right off of West 33rd Street. And this is the view of the plaza here. This is the rendering that was approved in 2019. And the current photo that Judy had shown earlier of the construction of the plaza. So it's ready right now to be opened up once the scaffolding comes down due to the windows replacement project overhead. And just to the right here where the barricades are, that's within the arcade. There's a covered arcade that's directly adjacent to the plaza. So in plan, again, the 2019 approved plan, There's really no changes to the plaza. There's a minor shift here of where the bench occurred between the 2019 and the current plan. We just shifted it to the south here a little bit more just to allow for a little bit more clearance so that it's a double-sided bench that could be seated there. We're highlighting here the area where the open air cafe is being proposed. This one is again well within the size limitations, only 541 square feet, which is only 9% of the overall plaza. This is that covered arcade that's just to the north that leads in toward the building here, and accessibility is up through the originally approved ramping to get up to this area here. What occurs here is that when the open air cafe is shown in here, the movable seating, we have located them so that it's up near the front of the cafe, again, visible from the street for easy access for the public to get up and use that. And then there's there's 56 chairs and 21 tables that are shown here within the cafe area. And that's the extent of the presentation here right now. Judy, was there anything else or Jeff that you'd like to add?
Yeah, I'm sure we'll have questions, and there were things that we didn't explain that we ought to have explained, but you know, look forward to the questions.
Great, thank you very much for the presentation. Maybe you can bring back the map, the plan with the West Plaza. I think this is probably where we're going to start with the questions. And let's jump right in. Members of the committee, we'll start with Dave Akilis. Dave.
Yeah, I'm just wondering exactly where the bathrooms are. I assume they're open and fully accessible, ADA and open to the public.
No, there are no public accessible bathrooms. That was not a requirement of the project. There are accessible bathrooms in Penn Station at both the Amtrak level and at the LIRR level.
Okay. Other questions?
Signage.
Nancy.
Are you complying with the signage for our bonus plazas? What do we call it? Where the seats are
we are in the process of complying. There were, you know, honestly, some signs that were kind of cantilevered up that didn't stick, and we're working to make sure that we are fully compliant. I would say we're about 90% compliant now, but.
Yeah, I think that Nancy's question had to do with CB5's policy. Nancy, do you want to explain what our okay, I will do the explaining. So Community Board 5 has a policy that for the open air cafes, while we're supportive of them, generally speaking, we believe that in the spirit of the zoning resolution, the seating ought to be open to the public without a need to purchase or be a customer. And to that effect, we ask that the POPs operator, the cafe, restaurant, or kiosk operator put signage on the tables and by the entrance of the area, making mention that the seating is open to the public without a need to purchase. So this is what Nancy is referring to. So I think the question, generally speaking, is: are you agreeable to abide by this stipulation that is Community Board 5's general guideline?
We respect that request, but we unfortunately cannot do that. We did speak about, in the off hours, can people, in the off hours use the cafe tables and chairs? And our policy has been to let anybody who's sitting there when the restaurant isn't open stay there, but it's not something that we can guarantee because tables and chairs get moved, they get locked up, they get put in different places for cleaning and maintenance. And so just the use of them in the off hours is permitted but not formal. But in the general course, we are sorry that we cannot do what your policy requires.
Okay. Maybe we can start with some basic sort of like factual questions. Can you actually tell us the expected hours of operation? And I don't know if you already have occupancy for those particular kiosks, and if you have the vendors already lined up. But what do you anticipate those hours are going to be?
So the first of all, the plaza itself is open a minimum of 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. 7 days a week. And when the cafes are operating, then it will be open at least until 10 p.m., but always open as long as any one of the cafes is open. The North and the Cafe A and Cafe B are leased to the same operator with different names and branding than that we has operated these two restaurants in the past. The rest of the spaces, the two kiosks and the Cafe C, are not leased. As you can see from this 2.5-year process for a 3-year permit. It makes all the sense in the world to get the permissions and then do the leasing. And then in terms of how late these cafes operate in the in-season, generally, at least one of them is open till around 11, and they can be open later, on a game night. But it's not, this was the kind of the first summer. There was a soft opening at the end of June. And so they didn't have that many months to operate in the good weather. So ultimately, like what their operating hours are going to be for starting next spring, for the outside, we don't know.
Okay, and when you said they started operating, this is for Cafe A and B, right?
Correct.
Okay, and the other ones have not yet been operated.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and just to clarify, the kiosks are also not fabricated yet or made, right? The two kiosks that are in the plaza on the plan here.
Okay, and can you speak a little bit to the number of tables, the proposed and the permitted under the 2019 permit? Let's start with Plaza West Plaza.
Sure, Mike, you want to run through those?
So in the West Plaza right now, in the Cafe A and B, there's a proposal for 102 seats within each one of those total, and then the Cafe C would be a 56 seat count within that seating area there.
And 56 for Cafe C.
Cafe C, yeah.
Okay. And what was approved in 2019? What did you propose to us in 2019, and what was ultimately approved by city planning?
So in 2019, and Jeff, you can clarify. So the two areas that were discussed in 2019 are the two A and B that are shown here. And Cafe A actually went from this lower level here, and then it went up onto the upper level in that central area of the West Plaza. I don't think there was a seat count that was specified at the time. It was just the areas that were defined.
Yeah, I'm not aware of, I don't have the number of tables and chairs of the previous approval.
I mean, it's always part of the application, so it must exist somewhere. Could you get us this information?
Sure. Yep.
Okay, thank you. And so the Cafe C is actually an addition in this current situation. It did not exist in the 2019 proposal.
right, there were two cafes that, you know, occupied a sizable amount of area that went into the center of the plaza, but now it's been sort of redistributed into three smaller cafes at the edges.
Got it. Okay. And can you speak a little bit about the work that has commenced, although the permit was not filed because you had understood from DCP that you did not require an additional permit. How far along are you with this work?
The work is completed except for punch list.
Okay, with the exception of the kiosks themselves, those are not built yet.
Correct.
Correct, yeah.
And those won't be built until, you know, they're leased.
Got it.
We don't
Okay,
want
but
kiosks there that are, you know, cluttering up the plaza that aren't serving a purpose.
Okay, and back in 2019, the design of the kiosk was the same as the design that you're submitting today.
So in
I
20,
somehow remember that they were much more porous and open.
it would be a similar design to the kiosk aesthetic, right? So you can see them here. That's that one on the north side here from the previous view. So it's the same design of the kiosk. We had them so that they were, as you had said, Layla, quite open and porous. So instead of, and we felt that instead of having two tucked away in the back over here, bringing that second one up to the middle here. So there's only two kiosks that are in the proposal now, rather than three. There's, I'll show you in the plan here. There's two additional ones that were kind of grouped together here on the back of the plaza, on the west side of the plaza here. So
yeah,
you see that coming
okay.
here. So
and
that,
can you speak to this back wall of the kiosk? They seem to be very solid. I don't remember them to be like that. You know, obviously this is the 2019 that you're showing us, but so my memory is failing me. But can you speak to this back wall? What is it made of? Is it opaque? Is it glass? Is it see-through? Is it some sort of like mesh material?
so right now the backs were the working side of the kiosk. So the other three sides would have been quite open. The design is a proposal right now. It hasn't been finalized or in fabrication or anything like that. So there's some possibilities. We want to get some input from the vendors as well to make sure that it's servicing them. But the idea was that there's a service side, and we kept the north side open so that you can again see that there's activity here from that side. And so essentially the three sides were quite open. I don't have another view of it.
Okay. Okay, all right. Give us a couple of numbers for the South Plaza in terms of the number of seats. So you said 21 seats on the South Plaza.
Correct. The South Plaza right now, it would end up having, where's my notes here?
I mean, I count 20 on the diagram, but
yeah, it's 20 tables, 50 chairs for the proposed open air cafe in this area here. That's 50 that would fit within here. And again, all the required seating, that's in addition to the required seating for the plaza itself that would be distributed throughout.
Okay,
right? So we
and on the West Plaza, is there any public seating?
Oh, the West Plaza is filled with all of. I'll zoom in here on the plan so you can see better. So all of these elements here, these are fixed benches that are at the underside of that sculptural light fixture, and they're able to be. You can sit on both sides of those benches, as well as movable tables and chairs that are all up near the front here, and then kind of equally distributed throughout the plaza. So as you can see,
and that adds to how many linear feet of seating?
the total number of seats. facility.
Melissa probably has that at her fingertips.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. Yes, the 2019 proposed seating had 665 linear feet of seats, and that includes both the movables and the fixed seating. The proposed current design has increased that to 683 linear feet of seating. So we have added.
And that is solely for the West Plaza, or does that encompass both?
That's solely for the West Plaza. So let's see, for the South Plaza, 1 second, let me see my notes. Okay, so we have 203 linear feet of seating now. In 2019, we had 203 as well. So we didn't change the seating amount. We just redistributed them.
Got it. Okay. Okay, that's very helpful.
I
Great.
think just to
Thank you
jump in.
for.
Sorry,
Yes.
just to jump in, I don't know if anyone mentioned it, but there was also an increase in planting in the West Plaza.
That's correct.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. As part of these changes.
Okay. And what about the I know that there's a requirement for art. Is the light sculpture your contribution to fulfill this requirement?
Correct.
And are
Yeah,
there
I don't
any
want
other-
to. I don't want to misspeak. I thought that the only place where we had an art requirement was on the North Plaza.
Yeah,
The sculptural lighting, I'm not sure that that counts as. I mean, we could make it qualify as art. I just want to be accurate in what we say.
Yeah, I do want to double check. I believe that art is you can have art as a permitted obstruction, but I don't believe it's a requirement.
That's my
Oh, okay.
understanding too, Jeff.
No,
Yeah,
there is a required art piece in the North Plaza.
The
to me.
north.
correct. That
part of
was one of our
29th.
amenities
Yeah.
that was proposed.
But the zoning doesn't require it. Yeah.
That's correct.
Okay, okay, all right. Very helpful for all the facts. Any more questions? Yeah, Julie.
Yeah, do you mind if I just follow up on Dave's question regarding bathrooms? Because I was looking at our 2019 reso and we specifically said deny unless public restrooms are provided. And I think the Penn Station bathrooms are a little too far away and too deep inside the station to be useful. And I think CB5 has been asking for existing bathrooms in the building, not something new, but just opening up a bathroom in one of the restaurants or a commercial building, ground floor. Is it something that you guys would be willing to explore?
When we've explored it in the past, the answer has been no, because it's it's a very challenged area, and we cannot subject our restaurant vendors to people with needles and other things coming in and using the restroom. And the Duane Reade has closed. There was a lot of theft there, and the area is not yet even with all of the improvements that we're making, the area is not yet ready for having our restaurateurs open up their bathrooms to the public.
Yeah, follow up, Julie, in comments maybe. Okay. And other questions? Yeah,
Just
Mike, really.
just to get the number for the plannings, what is the difference between 2019 and this proposal? For the West Plaza, the green space?
Yes, for the West Plaza in 2019, we had 2,848 square feet, and we've increased that to 3,124 square feet.
Okay.
Any other questions? So I have a couple other questions. Originally those plazas were supposed to be open 24/7. When you came to us in 2019, you made the case that actually having them open during the night was extremely challenging. And we certainly understand and appreciate that. I think at the time there was quite profuse discussion, especially about the opening time actually in the morning. People come to work early, and I actually remember that you, Mike, really had brought up the fact that, you know, some people have to be at work at 6 a.m., which means that they're going to get into the area around 5 a.m. So that was actually the requirement that we had. Is it something that you would consider actually to getting the plaza open earlier than 7 a.m.?
The East Plaza is the one where everybody said it needed to be. I mean, this is my recollection. So, and you're looking at the resolution, but the East Plaza is open from 5 a.m. to midnight. So that one, and then the West Plaza, what you all wanted was to match the hours of the entrance opening to the train station, which is 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. and this plaza 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. and also have it for the full year, because I think we were proposing to close it even earlier in the off season, and you said no, you need to keep it open the same hours all the time. And there may have been other discussions too, but those are the discussions that I remember. And so we ended up at 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. all year.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. That makes total sense. And then can you speak to the and I know it's not part of this application, but in 2019 there was also a new entrance to Penn Station that was actually through the lobby of One Penn, right?
Correct, yeah. That's right in this location here, right?
Yeah, and but this is not the elevator that is in the East Plaza, right? This is something different.
So right now there's an elevator that's located here directly adjacent to these escalators going down. That's the one that was in the photo earlier in the presentation. That's this elevator right here that was constructed right adjacent to the escalators that go down. That's that new entry. You can see it here. This is the that's that entry to Penn Station. It comes right off of the North Plaza, and the North Plaza and South Plaza are open 24/7, right? There's no closures to those plazas at all. In the east side, on the east side here, there's entrance to the station here directly adjacent to the East Plaza.
Okay. The other question, I think sort of like more generally speaking on, you know, the future of this area, under the GPP, both the West Plaza and the East Plaza would be redeveloped. Can you speak to this? And, you know, is this a temporary proposal? And given that these plazas are bonused, how does that play out, you know, when they are redeveloped?
So we are delivering permanent improvements consistent with the approved ULURP from 2019 to the same level as we would do any permanent plaza. The GPP is separate from this application and is addressed separately. So this is every bit, you know, every single, you know, foot candle has been calculated, lighting the sidewalks to the right foot candle has been calculated, all of the stonework, everything. This is, everybody needs these improvements now and they need them to be nice. So, so it's not, what we're delivering does not relate to a future, GPP plan.
Okay, and then they will be ripped up when the buildings go up.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Any other questions, Nancy?
No, on your other side.
Aaron, sorry.
Sorry.
Could you go back to the photo that shows the proposed kiosk location?
Mhm.
Can you just talk about, I know, the design's not locked, but can you talk about, I guess, the direction of like where the queuing would be? So if I'm going up and I want to make a purchase from the kiosk, what side is that happening?
Right now in this image here, it's showing that it would be occurring on the east side of the kiosk. On this side over here.
Got it, okay. And then can you go back to the closest photo that shows one of, I guess, Cafe C, which is the new one? So in regards to the idea that, you're not open to having seating that's not patrons, how are you planning to delineate the area of Cafe C to the public who are walking by? In other words, like, how are you going to stop someone from just sitting there? Because I don't think you're sort of, I just want to see what you're proposing for how you're enclosing that area.
So the city planning rule is a 2-inch thick, I think, white line. I'm not sure if the color is specified, but we're, doing it as a white line, that delineates the area.
Yeah, and that would just be on the edge on the ground. So this is, you can see here, this seating that's shown here along again, all the cafes are placed along the periphery. So there'd be a white dash line that's put along the ground.
Okay, because there's no original planters there, so there's no actual original plaza separation with that. Okay.
Yeah, correct. So that this kind of red dash line is just indicating where the boundary would be. Right.
And is A and B the same? It's just the painted boundary on the ground?
Correct.
Ready. I'm ready to ask.
Okay, and we have a question from Nancy. Nancy, go ahead.
If you could make the plan bigger.
Sure.
You indicate tables filled in, and then you have like a lighter color of tables and chairs. Are those the I guess it's like a lighter gray. Are those for the public?
Yeah, all the lighter gray ones here are for the public. These are the movable tables and chairs that would be within the overall plaza. And then we just highlighted these ones a little bit darker because, again, we're here for the open air cafe. Just to highlight that these are the ones that are within the boundary of the open air cafes.
That's very important. That changes things a little bit. How many seats do you have at the tables for the public in the lighter color?
In the lighter color.
Melissa, do you want to give that?
Yes, one second, please. So the number that I had said earlier, which is the 683 linear feet, so that is all the light movable tables and chairs as well as the fixed seating. So that does not include any seating that would be added for the open air cafes.
And so that amounts to about 340 total seats compared to 200, less than 260 for the
260
cafes.
And these brown areas here, you can see these are the fixed benches here, right? That you can see in the area here, right? So
and that's also
this is all public.
Yes.
Yeah, this is all public seating. You can see 2 seats here along
of the total seats. Is what percentage is private in cafe opposed to public? Just give us that percentage. That would be helpful.
We'll get you the exact number.
Okay. Great. Thanks.
Okay. we have our colleague Mary Brosnahan, who's joining us on Zoom. Mary, go ahead with your question.
Thanks, Layla. Judy, maybe I misheard you, but when you were doing the breakdown of the East versus the West Plaza, I thought you said that the West Plaza would mimic the hours of the train station, 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. I don't understand that because Penn Station is open 24 hours. Moynihan is closed between 1 a.m. and 5 a.m. But I just wasn't able to follow your logic that you were mirroring the hours of the train station.
No, thank you for that question. I didn't explain it clearly. So I really appreciate that. This entrance to the train station is from, our building, and the hours of operation of this entrance are 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. So the hours of operation of the plaza match the hours of operation of this specific entrance. And it's very similar. If you, do the, I don't know about the new Grand Central East Side access hours, but, the Madison Avenue entrances, were always closed before 10 p.m. So it's similar to, Grand Central, maybe a little longer than the hours that are operated at Grand Central for the.
Right, but Grand Central is not open 24 hours.
So, well, this is what we, I'm explaining the logic of what I said and what I meant to say. I'm not trying to, hide anything. Vornado, as the owner and operator of this office building, operates this entrance from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. And so it's closed other than that, and the hours of the plaza match those hours.
Okay. Thank you. Any other question? Yes, Mike, really.
I think I know what the answer is going to be, but I just want to get a response about. And in 2019, the borough president at that time was Gail Brewer. And then her recommendation was not to have a public bathroom in the plaza like we as CB5 requested, but to have a public bathroom at the bottom of the escalator and the elevator to Penn Station within One Penn Plaza. And that didn't happen. So I was wondering if that could happen in the future.
We can absolutely explore it for the future, like the next round of construction. But all of our basement spaces there on the concourse level, are being used for Long Island Railroad back of house space, train controls. The space in this moment is spoken for, and it's something that in future generations of plans, should always be on the table, because everybody wants to know, where there are, facilities.
Okay.
Just one additional question for me. Are there any bollards that are part of this application, and are there any additional bollards that are going to go on the perimeter of this particular block?
At this point, no. There are bollards that the MTA is putting in at the north edge of the East Plaza, and then at the 7th Avenue and 33rd Street side, and then also at the west end of what will be Plaza 33, and that's all to control vehicular access to the 33rd Street entrance to Penn Station.
Got it. Okay. All right, but all of this is MTA charge.
Correct. And then as part of our sidewalk improvement project, the existing MTA bollards will be reinstalled or replaced.
Okay, and are you, okay, all right. Any other questions, members of the committee? Okay. Let's open up to members of the public, in attendance. If you wish to speak on this particular application, you can use the raise hand function. Any questions or comments from members of the public on this particular item? Okay, so seeing none, we are moving to business session. During business session, members of the committee discuss this matter so that we can make a motion. Comments? Nancy? Dave?
I don't know if any of you remember, about 7 years ago, we actually had a full board meeting at One Penn Plaza. It was an office space, it was under construction. And while we were there, a representative from Vornado was complaining to the community board about the neighborhood problems they have. And the homeless people were using their plaza as a bathroom. And I thought to myself at that moment, here's one of the most powerful, successful real estate businesses in the world. And I thought that maybe they should take some responsibility for their success as a real estate company and do something to help the city and the homeless situation, and maybe something like a public bathroom or something there. Every other civilized city in the world has, except for New York City, and every other city has the same problems we do with the homeless and with drug addicts. And part of the problem with people are shooting up on the streets and everywhere. I get it in my neighborhood. I get a lot of complaints, from the neighborhood association. But the police, it's legal to shoot drugs on the street. That's just the way our city is right at the moment. The police can't do anything about it. So we have to find better ways to handle these problems. And I think ignoring them by let's not have any bathrooms to keep the public out and keep our plazas clean. That's not what's going to happen. They're going to be complaining about people using their plaza as a bathroom if bathrooms aren't built, just like they did 6 or 7 years ago. So I think this is something we really want to consider when we, present this resolution, is that they're the biggest real estate company in the world. They could probably make some bathrooms somewhere that would work, be clean and well lit, and with a higher security that they should be able to afford for their plaza. Take control of the situation and make the neighborhood better instead of complaining about it. That's my comment.
Yeah, thank you, Dave. Thank you for this passionate and very on point comment. Aaron?
It's hard to follow that comment, but I'll try. So, I know, kiosks are allowed. I believe it's one kiosk every 5,000 square feet. But, there is language about not blocking or impeding the circulation. In the old layout in 2019, they're on the side of the plaza. In this layout, to me, they're right in the middle of the thing. And wherever the people are lining up and queuing, to me, it's going to impede the circulation of the plaza. So I feel like that's an issue. We haven't run into that recently, but just looking at the way that language was written, to me, this is problematic, the way that layout is proposed. And especially because you're going to have 3 other cafes where people are, have to be patrons to use those seats. There's lots of lovely seating that's available. But then you also have patrons of the kiosks who will also then be seating. And I think that's really going to really clutter, really hurt the circulation in the middle of the plaza, where you have those 3 areas competing with the 2 separate kiosks, all serving food, and people all trying to sort of find where places to go with their food.
I noticed that the north kiosk was directly in front of one of those permanent benches, that there appeared to be about 3 or 4 feet between the kiosk and one of those permanent benches there, the north kiosk.
Yeah.
That's the way I looked at it in the picture.
Yeah.
Yeah, good point.
Other comments,
I have a
Nancy?
concern. When we have a cafe permit or a pop, usually one at a time, we have very specific requirements. with all of this coming together with 3 cafes and all, our cafe permit is kind of lost.
Well,
That's,
you know,
it's
in essence,
ambiguous.
in essence, this is what is in front of us. You know, it is, you know, an additional kiosk. It's really the legalization of, you know, modification to a special permit because they did the work. And, you know, I think that on that, there is some good faith on their end that, you know, they didn't think they needed a permit. The new administration comes in and says, no, actually you do, you know. But I think that the issues that are in front of us are, let's try to, you know, organize our thoughts. Definitely the public bathroom. The increase in the private seating, I think, is substantial because, you know, they would have 102 seats plus an additional 56. So it's an, you know, 158 seats on the West Plaza. This is very substantial. This is going to be immensely popular. This is going to be, you know, a very lucrative operation. And you know, I really feel that, you know, if it were not used for commercial purposes, then it would be public seating. And you know, I really feel that there has to be a good balance. Right now, I feel that, you know, I agree with Aaron's comment. You know, I find that the design is actually pretty, you know, bulky and very opaque, you know, and I would be concerned for safety. I think that, you know, behind, you know, at the back of these kiosks, you can easily hide and, you know, this sort of like narrow path, I think is poorly designed. I would like to see that reworked. And I think that the location of the additional kiosk is poorly thought out. I think that the 2019 design was a better idea to have it tucked out of the way. I think we want these areas to be as porous and, you know, with, you know, open views as possible for a good you know, good urban design. So, you know, the issue is the bathroom, the number of seating, the addition of the kiosk, and then, you know, the concern that we have with every cafe application, which is that, you know, we believe that in you know, in keeping with the language of the zoning resolution, a public cafe is supposed to promote the public use of the space. And the public use of the space is in direct opposition with the private use of the space. And therefore, while it is okay to have private use, it has to also allow for public seating. So that has been our long-standing position. I really don't see any compelling reason why we would change that. I think that, you know, we would probably make a different determination if it was a true and strong public benefit. In this case, I don't see any. And I think, you know, those are really the 3 key issues. Yeah.
I just
Mike.
want to make a correction. The seats for the cafe is 102 each, so it's 260 seats total for the Westin. And then when I counted the seats for the public, 100% public, is 156 movable seats. Besides, I didn't count the benches.
Yeah, it's hard to then count the, you know, I mean, the whole notion of linear feet is tricky because they don't do linear feet for the private seating. So.
Right. So I'm just saying there's 156 movable chairs that are 100% public and 216 that are semi-public for the cafes.
That are not public. That is exclusively
Well,
for the
they're
cafe.
saying out of season, in between meals, I guess, whenever.
Yeah, but they say it's not guaranteed, and you
they're
know,
not
it's
gonna
like,
use our signage. They're not gonna do our signage.
and they're not going to do the signage. So
The signage that we
yeah.
recommend or that we
So
require.
usually that suggests that, you know, it's not really going to happen.
Well, I'm sure they're gonna have security there to shoo away people, and that will help with their
Yeah.
bathroom situation also.
My concern with the signage is that since none of these cafes are leased yet, that once the person who's leasing the cafe does their lease, that our signage requirements won't be in that lease.
No,
So
in
they
any
will,
case,
they will not,
they're not
they're not
agreeing to
agreeing.
it, they're absolutely not agreeing to it. Okay, so I think we are pretty clear on the facts now, how do we want to take this on the road?
Like say deny or deny unless or stipulations. Or just deny.
It's obviously up to you, but Judy, as we have this.
We're in business
To
session,
you, as I
Yeah.
said.
thank you.
I just want to make sure you saw.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, we need a motion. Judy,
Oh, what, can I say something or no?
sorry, I'm sorry, Judy, we're in business session, so
Okay, no,
now
that's what I thought.
any members of the committee
So just say
can discuss the matter. I was actually calling on my colleague Julie, sorry.
Can we do, I think,
So deny,
just deny.
deny,
Okay, so Julie, you're making a motion.
to deny.
We need a second.
Second.
Okay, all right. And I think it will be useful in the resolution to really clearly mention the reasons why, and maybe we can frame it as in saying that, you know, were they to agree to abide by all these recommendations, we would probably consider an approval.
For what,
EJ?
for what it's worth, the 2019 resolution had 2 resolves and that were deny unless, and they, for various reasons, haven't complied with either of them. So it would be consistent to deny on both those grounds because we denied unless in 2019 and they didn't.
And they
comply with our
never-
conditions.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Good point.
Okay, all right,
And that
so,
probably needs to be mentioned in the resolution. We need to mention the 2019.
yes, yeah.
Deny unless so that people understand there's a history here.
Yeah, okay, so we have a motion by Julie, who seconded?
Second.
And David, seconded, so we're ready to take this to a vote.
Okay, first note of the night, folks vote. Leila,
Yes,
Aaron is a yes. David,
Yes.
Nick,
Yes.
just a clarification, Mary is not able to vote.
yes, she is.
Mary,
Yes.
Nancy,
Yes.
EJ,
Yes.
Renee is not here. Craig,
Yes.
Kim,
Yes.
Julie,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
and CJ. Yes.
Okay, the motion passes. Thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is a citywide zoning text proposal known as the City of Yes for economic opportunity. And we have the Department of City Planning with us tonight. I see Janelle is here and Ezra and Matt. Turning it to you guys. And the floor is yours. We're very happy to hear more details about this pretty complex and very important and very significant proposal for CB5.
Thank you. And so I'm going to share my screen and then begin my presentation. And hopefully we can have questions at the end. One second, sorry.
The materials here.
Okay, are you able to see my screen?
Yes, we are.
Okay. So please let me know at any point if it's not my presentation, but I'm going to begin now. So hello everyone, and thank you for taking the time to hear about the proposal and discuss next steps. My name is Janelle, and I'm DCP's Planner Liaison for Community Board 5, and I'm joined tonight by Matt Waskowitz, a lead planner and project manager on the City of Yes for Economic Opportunity proposal, and in my opinion, a subject matter expert. And I'm also joined by Ezra Moser, who is my team leader. So I'm going to give a quick overview of my presentation. So I'll start by outlining the proposal's overall goals, and then we'll look at the applicability maps for Community Board 5 so we can see how these proposals will impact the area specifically. And these first two items should take about 20 minutes to discuss. And I also have appendix slides where we can discuss specific proposals you may have questions about and go into detail about that later on. So City of Yes for Economic Opportunity is the second of 3 citywide initiatives to update our city's zoning regulations. So the first was City of Yes for Carbon Neutrality, which was focused on reducing carbon emissions. Today we'll be discussing economic opportunity, and also coming down the pipeline is City of Yes for Housing Opportunity, which aims to address the city's housing crisis, and that is expected to begin public review in next spring. Economic Opportunity was certified on October 30th and was referred to all community boards, borough presidents, and borough boards who will have until the first week of February to submit recommendations. And after that, it will go to the CPC and then the City Council. So to frame the conversation, I'll start by mentioning that zoning regulations have a significant impact on local businesses because it governs how they operate, where they can locate, and how they can expand. So as we all know, New York City can be a challenging place to run a business, and in some cases, government regulation contributes to that problem. Zoning rules governing businesses pose issues by either restricting them outright from locating or regulating how they conduct business with complicated or unclear rules. For example, current regulations restrict the amount of floor area a bakery can dedicate to actually baking. Our current zoning resolution is 60 years old. Therefore, our overarching vision for this initiative is to modernize the regs and ensure that the zoning works for our economy. As a result of this, we hope to have a zoning resolution that's more simple, adaptable, and up with the times. Now I'll outline the 4 goals of this proposal. So first, we want to make it easier for businesses to find space and grow. The main way we propose to do this is by lifting zoning barriers so businesses can be closer to their customers. Second, we want to support growing industries by reducing obstacles for emerging business types such as urban agriculture, life sciences, and amusements. Third, we want to foster vibrant neighborhoods by ensuring that businesses contribute to active, safe, and walkable streets. And fourth, and finally, we want to create new opportunities for businesses to open in the future by creating new kinds of zoning tools that can boost growth and business expansion in all 5 boroughs. I'll now go through each of the 18 proposals we must change in our zoning to meet these goals. Our first 6 proposals focus on making our zoning more simple, adaptable, and modern, so businesses can easily locate and grow. Proposal 1, reactivate storefronts. Today, storefronts that are deemed non-conforming have 2 years to be reactivated or else they must remain vacant. This is a direct contributor to vacancy in our city, so we're proposing to remove that time clock and allow vacant storefronts to be reoccupied. Proposal 2, simplify district types. In many places of the city, we have similar zoning districts that are located along the same corridor or on opposite sides of the street, and yet they allow different kinds of businesses. These outdated and confusing sets of rules routinely holds back business location or expansion. We're proposing to simplify the differences between similar kinds of zoning districts and make it easier for businesses to know where they can locate. Proposal 3, enable more small-scale production. To keep up with the changes in technology and a vastly different economy, we want to allow small-scale clean production like a pottery studio, bakery, coffee roaster, or a jewelry maker, and things like that, to locate in commercial districts for the first time instead of only being allowed in manufacturing districts. Proposal 4, no more unnecessary loading docks. If one of the aforementioned clean production businesses wanted to move into an empty office building, today they would face rules that require them to add additional loading docks, even if they don't necessarily need them and the building can't physically accommodate them. We want to allow for older commercial buildings to change over time by not mandating a business to tear apart the ground floor of a building to provide new loading docks. Proposal 5, allow commercial on upper floors. Today, zoning allows for many buildings to have a mix of residential and commercial uses, but sometimes restricts businesses from being able to use the upper floors of a building. This limits options for new buildings to contain both residences and businesses, or for older buildings to adapt over time. We want to enable renovations or new construction of mixed-use buildings in places where it makes sense by allowing commercial uses at the same level or above residences. And I want to note that this is provided that complete separation is maintained between the uses. Proposal 6, modernize use terms. Additionally, many of the terms used to classify businesses in the zoning resolution are outdated. For example, it references typewriter repair. This makes it more difficult for newer business types like cell phone repair shops to know where they can locate. So we're proposing to simplify and modernize the terms we use in zoning to classify businesses. Each of the industries highlighted on this slide, urban agriculture, life sciences, nightlife, amusements, and home-based businesses, face ambiguity or outdated restrictions in our zoning. Our second goal aims to address those obstacles to help emerging business types thrive. Proposal 7. Businesses that want to operate indoor agriculture facilities, such as vertical farming within commercial areas, face uncertainty with today's zoning rules. We would clarify that indoor agriculture is allowed in commercial districts so more food can be grown closer to communities. Proposal 8. Life science laboratories face confusing and outdated rules that slow the development of new facilities. We would make it clear that labs without potential for environmental hazard are appropriate in office settings, and we'd also expand where an existing special permit can be used, so labs can locate closer to research centers like hospitals and universities. Proposal 9. Restaurants and bars face confusing regulations on whether they can host concerts, dancing, comedy shows, or open mic nights. We're simplifying the rules so they're based on the size of the venue rather than the activity occurring within. Small venues would be allowed in neighborhood commercial corridors and larger venues in places like Midtown. Proposal 10. Zoning has outdated terms for defining experiential amusement businesses like virtual reality or children's arcades, and often restricts these kinds of businesses to Coney Island or the city's industrial areas. We would simplify and modernize how zoning treats amusements and recreational activities to make it clear that these businesses are allowed both indoors and at a small scale on a neighborhood street and at a larger scale in office districts. Proposal 11. Many New Yorkers start their businesses in their homes, and zoning allows for a wide range of home business types, such as lawyers, jewelry makers, and music teachers. However, currently it does not include certain professions like barbers or interior decorators, and has other restrictions that hold back business creation. We're proposing to enable entrepreneurship with modern rules for home-based businesses while keeping in place safeguards to ensure that home-based businesses are being good neighbors. Goal 3's proposals were designed to ensure that businesses contribute to active, safe, and walkable streets. Proposal 12. Streetscape conditions like long blank walls and drive-throughs break up retail streets and can create unpleasant and sometimes unsafe conditions for pedestrians. But in vast parts of the city, there are no rules whatsoever to prevent new buildings that make conditions even worse. We're proposing to create a consistent and easy to understand baseline set of rules for commercial ground floor design, ones that are more responsive in areas with greater pedestrian activity and more relaxed in the city's more auto-oriented corridors. Proposal 13. Auto servicing and repair businesses are typically treated as industrial businesses and located far from retail streets and residential neighborhoods. But some exceptions exist that allows auto repair and storage activities to spill out onto the sidewalk in neighborhood commercial streets, creating safety concerns for pedestrians. We're proposing to rationalize and consolidate the range of auto servicing uses in zoning into two categories: light and heavy vehicle repair and maintenance. Heavy vehicle maintenance would be licensed by the state DMV and would continue to be allowed in industrial areas, while light vehicle repair could locate elsewhere after appealing to the boards of standards and appeals. Proposal 14. Zoning does not allow for delivery activity within buildings except in industrial areas, forcing the activity and drop-offs to occur on sidewalks and in the streets. We're proposing to create a new type of use in zoning called a micro-distribution facility and allow these businesses to locate at a small scale in commercial areas, encouraging deliveries to shift to alternative modes of transportation and regulating the creation of local hubs for safe and sustainable deliveries to occur. Our fourth and final goal is to create new opportunities for businesses to open by establishing new kinds of discretionary zoning tools for the future economic success of our city. Proposal 15. Many large-scale residential developments, such as NYCHA campuses, are zoned as residence districts, meaning retail, services, and makerspaces cannot easily locate, further distancing residents from certain local goods and services. This proposal would create a CPC authorization to allow up to 15,000 square feet of commercial space in existing or new construction on a large-scale residential campus. This would give residents greater access to basic necessities or the space to grow a new business. Proposal 16. Some places in the city are not within walking distance of a local retail store like a corner store, and zoning has no pathways to potentially allow these new locally serving businesses to open. This proposal creates a discretionary pathway that allows new corner stores, provided that it does not generate any environmental concerns or traffic congestion. Proposal 17. In some instances, businesses lack options for waiving certain non-FAR related zoning rules. For example, film studios often struggle to build sound stages because of certain yard requirements and setback heights. Or a clothing store might want to expand to occupy an empty second floor, but find that size limitations or location rules prevent them from doing so. We're expanding the zoning toolkit that will allow businesses to waive some zoning rules on a case-by-case basis. Proposal 18. Currently, low-density options, physical design rules, and parking make it impossible to build loft-like buildings even in areas where they already exist. This proposal will create a range of new job-intensive zoning districts at a range of densities and heights that expand the zoning toolkit for future rezonings. So on this slide is a recent snapshot of Community Board 5's economy. So there are about 920,000 jobs in the district, and private sector employment is at 94% of what it was before the pandemic, which is slightly lower than the average in Manhattan. And I also want to note that this map to the right shows storefront vacancy in the district, and it's a little hard to read given that it's a business district. But I just wanted to let you know what's depicted on this slide. And then on the next slides, I'll get into the applicability maps for the district and what this proposal exactly means in CD5. So on this slide, you can see how the proposal will impact all the zoning districts located within Community Board 5. So it will modernize loading dock rules, simplify use terms, give businesses increased access to waiver processes to seek zoning modifications through the BSA or CPC. And lastly, it would add new types of commercial and manufacturing zoning districts to the zoning toolkit that would be available to applicants seeking rezonings in the future. So listed on this slide are the proposals that would affect the C1 districts within Community Board 5. And in the interest of time, I won't go into detail due to the size of the C1 district, but I'll definitely go into detail more if we have questions at the end. And then similarly, there are no C2 districts in Community Board 5, so I'm going to jump past this one. And within C4 districts in the area, this proposal will have an effect, but the same proposals that are being applied in C4 districts are also being applied in C5 districts and C6 districts. So I'm going to quickly go over the C4 and C5, but then go into detail on the C6 district slide. So there's one C4 district that you can see in the light blue color here. And here are the C5 districts. And in terms of the things to the left of the screen, they won't be changing much, but then everything will be listed out on the C6 slide. So now I'll go into details on the proposals that will bring the C4 and C5 districts up to C6. So all C4, C5, and C6 districts will allow clean production businesses up to 10,000 square feet on the ground floor without a limit above. They'll have modernized loading dock rules, and these districts will also allow commercial uses at the same level or above residences. And as I noted before, physical separation will be required. These districts will also have simplified and modernized use terms, and they will allow fixes to enclosures and indoor agriculture, and there will be fixes to enclosures and indoor agriculture. Eating or drinking establishments will be able to contain entertainment with cover charges or specific show times. Indoor amusements or recreation facilities will be allowed without size limitation. There will be a new framework for ground floor street design. Light motor vehicle repair and maintenance shops will be allowed via BSA special permit, and micro distribution facilities will be allowed up to 5,000 square feet on the ground floor and 10,000 square feet above. So in residential districts, which there are 2 of in Community Board 5, There would be an opportunity to reactivate vacant storefronts past the current 2-year limit. This proposal also updates the rules for home occupations, which would enable a wider range of home-based businesses while existing rules remain to ensure that people are being good neighbors. This proposal would introduce a new CPC authorization that allows up to 15,000 square feet of commercial space in existing or new construction on a large-scale residential campus. And I want to note that there are no NYCHA or large-scale residential campuses in Community Board 5. And lastly, there would be a new process to potentially allow new corner stores in residential areas. But once again, I want to note that this proposal specifically, I believe, was aimed at lower density districts and is not really applicable to Community Board 5. So next, we'll discuss manufacturing districts. So these districts will also have the modernized loading dock rules that I've mentioned before in the simplified use terms. And this proposal would also give businesses access to a more rationalized waiver process to seek zoning modifications through the BSA or CPC. And lastly, new types of commercial and manufacturing districts would be added to the zoning toolkit that would be available to applicants in future rezonings. And lastly, we'll discuss the special districts. So this proposal would align ground floor use rules where they're inconsistent with the purpose of the special district. And as mentioned before, it would simplify use terms and enhance corridor design rules. So to wrap up my presentation with where we are in the process, we're currently in the 60-day referral period, and the department will be accepting recommendations until the first week of February. And we'll also be at next month's land use, housing, and zoning meeting to further discuss this proposal and answer any other questions. And so now I want to take some time to address specific concerns or questions about the proposal. And I also have a slide that shows which sections of the zoning resolution this proposal will affect. So if anyone wants to reference a specific chapter, let me know and I can go back to this slide.
Okay, great. Before we jump into any substantial questions, can you go back to page 19? It's page 19, the page for the manufacturing districts. Okay, the manufacturing district to the southernmost manufacturing district on the map. My understanding is that this is a commercial district. This was rezoned to a C64A. And do I have this wrong? Did you reverse that at some point?
No, this is a M15M district. This depicted. Sorry for the hoarse voice. I have COVID. This is not the Ladies Mile.
I'm confused. This is not. Oh, right.
Yeah, it's the southernmost depicted manufacturing district. If I'm not mistaken, is a M15M district.
But can you make the map larger?
You really need to see the streets.
Yeah, it's bounded by East 22nd Street to the north, and East. It looks like halfway between East 18th and East 17th to the south. And then it's part the way on the block, 5th Avenue to the west and Park Avenue south to the east.
And oh, I see. Okay, got it. Thank you so much.
I was fearful that you had discovered an error in our Zola
Oh my God, that would be grand. That would be grand. You know, it's like winning the lottery when that happens. Okay, all right. Now I'm situated. Sorry, it's totally my mistake. Okay, let's jump into the substance of this very, very dense presentation. Just to frame things a little bit for members of the committee, so basically there are 18 proposals. They don't apply to us equally. They will apply to parts of our district. Overall, they all apply, but quite frankly, the first one is really not going to be significant. I think that the best way to use our time today is just to spill out all the questions that we have. We have a little bit of time to go through it, so it's not, we're definitely not taking a position today. So I think the opportunity is really to have the great team at DCP with us, and we can just, throw our questions their way, get clarification, get our thoughts a little bit organized on what challenges we see with this proposal, what questions we have, what clarifications we need. And then next month we will revisit, we'll do some homework on our own, some reading, and then the DCP team will be with us again to help us go through this very dense proposal. So in no particular order, let's start to shoot questions for the DCP team. Nick.
Does the amusement category include gambling?
It does not. That the proposal is to create a citywide text amendment for gaming facilities is traveling as a separate action. It is not part of this proposal for consideration, and it would be a separately defined use term. So it is not part of the amusements use term that is defined here in this proposal.
I actually have a follow-up on that, Matt. Although it is a separate action, the negative declaration is the negative declaration of DOE. Can you speak to that?
Sure. So that's correct. The environmental assessment for gaming facilities and that action was included in the same environmental assessment for this action. And I'll also note, as a technical matter, proposals 1 through 17 of this action are one action, and proposal 18 is actually its own separate non-ULURP text amendment. So what we are asking you to consider this evening are the two actions related to what's on the screen here. So proposals 1 through 18 of City of Yes for economic opportunity. And then gaming facilities are being considered in a separate action that's moving on its own timeline, and I believe will be considered in separate meetings.
But my specific question is, where do we find the conclusion, and how do you conclude that there's a negative declaration on a gaming facility? What kind of socioeconomic study has been done that demonstrates that a casino would not have any negative socioeconomic impact, for example? Where do we find this the specific data? Because it's a little odd that actually the action itself is not part of ZOE, while the negative declaration is.
Yeah. For the details of some of that, I'll have to refer you to my colleague who's managing that project, but I can speak generally to the overall assessment. And it was determined in part because the use is never going to be allowed as of right on its own, that a separate discretionary action would be necessary in order to facilitate it. That is part of it, but again, I want to give you the right technical details, so we'll get back to you on that.
Okay. All right, other questions? Yeah, EJ.
Just at a real high brief level, can you talk a little bit about what types of regulations would go into the proposal that would prevent large blank stretches of storefront, large, sorry, I forget which one it was characterized as, but the, do you know which proposal I'm talking about?
Yeah, long blank walls are part of our streetscape regulations. So this was part of our I'll take you on a bit of our journey in developing this proposal. So when we started, a lot of our streetscape proposal came from the assumption that in Manhattan, where you have special districts, there are probably great protective streetscape rules that prevent a lot of what we're seeing as outcomes that from a design perspective are not contributing to economic vibrancy that you see in places where there are no rules in many of the boroughs outside of Manhattan. And then we started digging into it, and we realized that a lot of the existing special districts, in fact, don't have the same protections that you would expect them to have, or they're applied inconsistently. And blank walls are a great example of this, where if you look at the special district regulations, there is, in fact, I'm looking at Midtown Special District, there's no rule whatsoever right now. And so what we're proposing would apply to the underlying zoning and would enhance your special district in the sense that it would create a rule where if you have at least 50, or if you would have 50 feet or more of blank wall, so that could be, well, usually it's typically brick or some sort of masonry, that you have to do something to activate that long blank wall. So that could be more ornamental brickwork, that could be some sort of mural or some sort of live planter, or ideally it's some sort of form of transparency. The idea is to provide options for how to meet the standard, but to create a standard where one does not exist today.
Got it. So it wouldn't necessarily require some type of door or entryway or commercial activity or anything specific. It could be, you could be complying with this regulation with art or, some type of decorative, but ultimately just sort of cosmetic.
The idea would be to create some sort of need to comply with something where today there is no rule whatsoever. You can do whatever you want. So we're trying very carefully to not create onerous or overly prescriptive regulations. There's, of course, a balance. The more prescriptive you get, the harder they are to meet. Going back to the ethos and goal of these proposals overall is to make it easier for small businesses to locate and grow. But we feel pretty strongly in what the deeper we got into our streetscape regulations and where we recognize just they aren't doing what we thought they did. And that's especially true in places where special districts have some rules. For example, I'm looking at the rules for Midtown right now. So you have transparency rules, but no blank wall rules. And so your transparency might cover you in most instances, but in other places where there is no transparency rule, you don't have that coverage. And so it's creating greater consistency.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Other questions, Nick?
Where you propose to ease nightlife restrictions, are you considering proximity to residences?
We are considering the existing regulations for, I believe it's C4 districts, where you have lobby requirements and you also have proximity from a residence district requirements. We're keeping those in place. Same thing for C6 districts, where you have those requirements, we're keeping them. The main change for your district is we're taking the C6 regulations for nightlife and we're applying them to C5. So today, where you can have dancing, but it has to be in a ballroom, that varies much out of the 1950s. And so we recognize that there's in a lot of the changes we're making, that we are collapsing some of the distinctions for use between C5 and C6, recognizing that those lines are pretty arbitrary in today's Midtown and certainly in today's city's economy when it comes to use. We're keeping all the other differences between C5 and C6 in place. But as it relates to nightlife, that is the main thrust of the change. The rationale being that you can have musical entertainment in many of these places as of right. You can have bands, but you can't have people dance to those bands. And so it's that sort of discrepancy of the form of the entertainment that we want to address, not to mention the discriminatory history of the cabaret laws, which still exists in our zoning.
Okay, and just to clarify for everybody, the Department of City Planning looks at districts and not specific buildings. So they, as a very big difference with the SLA, where they really look at, a residential building. Here they just look at the compatibility between districts. So if you are in a C district, whether it's C5 or C6, residential buildings are as of right, and they live under the same rules as the commercial building. So they can be next to a nightclub, they can be next to a auto shop, all these uses, or a restaurant, all these uses are permitted. Julie.
I wanted to follow up on EJ's question. If sounds like there's a lot of carrots, and I wonder if there's any sticks, because San Francisco just implemented a vacant storefront tax. It's $250 per linear foot. I'm just wondering if DCP would be, open to exploring something like that, so that landlords would lower the cost of these vacant storefronts and allow nonprofits and,
startups.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
I mean, it's a fair question generally, and I think I can attest that we've spent over the last 2 years an awful lot of time looking at what other cities are doing. We're all dealing with the same challenges, especially today, and a lot of empty office space we're looking to fill, a lot of vacant storefronts as a result of that empty office space and work from home that we're looking to fill. And so we're trying as many approaches as we can within the tools that zoning has. Admittedly, taxing authority is not something that, at least in New York City, zoning can do. It's something that is typically reserved for other agencies, and in our case, the state. But I will say that these proposals, as you rightly point out, are mostly focused on those carrots. How do we incentivize, or the inverse, how do we remove the barriers to filling that empty space? Whether that's converting offices to another type of commercial use, a type of light industrial use that exists today in the form of custom manufacturing, but we want to modernize that sort of framework, and just different ways that the zoning is contributing to making it harder to fill storefronts and harder to fill offices. So I hear you, and I definitely think that we as a city need to be thinking as an all of government approach to how we fill some of this space. We've been working with a lot of other city agencies, SBS in particular, throughout this process, understanding how we can collaborate on where zoning ends and other agencies begin in the incentives that they can provide and the tools they can have.
Okay, thank you. I see that Mary Brosnahan on Zoom, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for such a terrific presentation. I think it relates to proposal 10, but the phrase that leapt out at me was encouraging entertainment venues without size limitations. Could you expand on that?
Sure. So in a C6 district today, you can have a bar or restaurant. In our zoning, it's an eating or drinking establishment, and they can have live entertainment that includes dancing, and there is no restriction on capacity today. So that's the current zoning for these kinds of businesses. There are other ways in which there are capacity, of course. Department of Buildings and FDNY regulate the capacity from a safety perspective, but from zoning, there is no capacity on these businesses today. What this proposal for your district will do is take those existing C6 regulations and allow them to come into the other half of Midtown, the C5 districts, where they are not currently allowed. And I should also add, the city's M districts have the same regulations for nightlife as the C6 districts, so they're allowed without capacity limit today in zoning.
Okay, thank you. Can you speak a little bit about the proposal 7, urban agriculture, and we're gonna grow the food that we eat. I think we're gonna grow the food that we smoke. And I think that has some major implications. Can you speak a little bit to that?
Sure. So today you can, in our zoning, you can have a greenhouse in a commercial district, and you can grow any kind of plant that the state allows you to grow. What you cannot do is grow plants that you would have in a greenhouse within an indoor space. So this includes vertical farming, this includes hydroponics. And so the zoning, what we're trying to do here is say in a commercial district, what you could do in a greenhouse, you can also do within a building. You're right to point out that the state considers cannabis like any other agricultural product. And so if someone were to obtain the cannabis licensing or the cannabis license for cultivation or nurseries, then they could locate because they're technically an agricultural use. Now, I'm emphasizing the license here because that is a really important part of this. Zoning, as many of you may be aware, but I'll just point out, zoning is limited in what it can do about illegal activity. And that's true of a whole range of activities that are not legal or not allowed. And certainly right now, we all are dealing with a lot of cannabis dispensaries that are not licensed by the state. And just recently, the city announced some more recent measures to begin continuing to shut down these illicit businesses. So the enforcement is happening. It is not happening, I think, as fast as what we've heard many people say they would like to see. We recognize that, we're sympathetic to it. But I just want to sort of make the distinction of what zoning can and cannot do. So back to urban agriculture. If someone obtains a cultivation license from the state, yes, they could locate. They could locate in one of the M districts in CB5 today. And that's regardless of the current zoning, because in an M district today, you can have indoor agriculture without size limitation, without any sort of stipulations on that use. So this would allow indoor agriculture in C districts. Yes, that could include cannabis cultivation if someone obtains a license from the state.
So let me ask you more broadly, what problem are you trying to solve with this particular proposal?
Currently in the zoning use group, agriculture has two uses. There's use group 4 agriculture and there's use group 17 agriculture. Use group 17 agriculture is allowed indoors or outdoors. Use group 4 agriculture, and this goes back to the planners of the 1960s, and it's not thinking about technology. They required it to be an open use. Department of Buildings has over time interpreted open to include greenhouses, but they are not and do not interpret open to mean indoors because open is not enclosed. So the technical change we're making is removing that. It's kind of the opposite of an enclosure requirement, removing the open requirement from the use group 4 agriculture and restricting that business to commercial districts.
But my question is more, have you heard that, farmers are really struggling, and if only the zoning would permit, then we would have, and so to speak more to that, because it's a little puzzling. We see the intense pressure in our district of, bringing incredibly lucrative businesses, and, a very speculative market, and farming, with the exception of cannabis, is not usually a high yield crop. So help us think about that in a more detailed way.
I'll put it two ways, and I think the first is to think about innovation in this space. And so in crafting this proposal, we spoke a lot with DOB to understand how they're interpreting this currently, but we also spoke and worked quite a bit with the Mayor's Office of Urban Agriculture. They're a somewhat new office, but they were created in part with the mandate to expand operations for growing. We, with them, hosted a series of focus groups with people who are doing hydroponic, non-cannabis hydroponic agriculture, people who are growing mushrooms, people who are growing greens, people who are growing all sorts of things in New York City for consumers in New York City. And we also held workshops with people who are more on the nonprofit and community garden side, looking to get more into urban agriculture indoors. And both from a grassroots scale and from a more commercial scale, there's great demand. And what we heard from multiple stakeholders in these sessions is, I would like to locate in storefront space. And I'd like to be able to have, say, some bit of growing and retail, where I can grow what I have and it's kind of display, but it's also kind of showy, and also be able to have a restaurant that has growing going in it, or to have some sort of a just be able to combine uses. So that's one use case that we heard very explicitly for this proposal. The second is more focused on the science and research and development. So speaking with particularly the EDC's life sciences team, which is another proposal we can get to if folks have questions on it, they identified one of the directions that the city has a competitive advantage in is food and agricultural science. And interestingly enough, that kind of weird crossover between when you're doing research in plant-based foods, it might be life sciences, but it's actually much more considered agriculture. And because it's falling in a zoning gray area, it was their feeling in talking with folks among the industry that DOB actually might start to consider it an agricultural use rather than a research and development use. And so it's just another example of zoning, when it's unclear, when it's restrictive, it holds back innovation. Certainly, we would see this kind of activity happening in office space in Midtown if it were allowed.
Okay, all right. And who's in charge of the Office of Urban Agriculture?
Sure. Her name is Kiana Mickey. I'm happy to put her email in the chat. They've been tremendous partners from the beginning of this, but I'm sure they'd be happy to speak with you all further.
Okay, terrific.
Kind of follow up.
Yeah, although, I mean, we have probably still a lot to cover, but yeah, go ahead, Dave, go ahead.
Well, it's indoor agriculture. I'm gonna assume there's zoning that restricts people making green spaces on roofs of building, where when climate change is concerned, it's a good thing for the whole communities to open up green space outside of buildings. Is there anything zoning that we've been discussing in the city of Yes that approaches discussing outside
Yeah,
green
I
space on
think
roofs?
that was in the carbon neutrality.
That's right.
Yeah,
Carbon neutrality.
yeah.
We have local laws too that require new roofs to be either green or PV.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's taken care of in the local laws.
Yeah. Mike.
On proposal 10, I think, with the amusement rides, is this gonna be like Coney Island style rides? Is there gonna be a height limit or a square footage limit on what will be allowed in a commercial area?
It's a great question, Mike, and thanks for asking it, because I think the term amusements for some boards has been a bit of a misnomer. I like to describe these as experiential businesses and emphasize that part first. So we're talking about things like laser tag and escape rooms and virtual reality and other kinds of businesses that, similar to urban agriculture and the research, is kind of falling into a zoning gray area today. Some of these businesses can make the case that they are accessory to a bar. So you might have a bar and then it's an arcade. But if you want to do primarily some sort of experiential amusement type business, zoning says you're only allowed in an M district or you're only allowed in a C7 district, which is Coney Island. Now, you all have some M districts, and I think you'll find that, at least this has been my experience experiencing these businesses, the indoor mini golf happens to be located in an M district. All the kinds of experiential businesses you're seeing locating in your community district, they're locating in the M district portions, in part because that's where the zoning is clear that they can go. So what this proposal does is it says those kinds of businesses, you can go into commercial districts as well. We have a pretty precise definition that we've included on these businesses in our draft zoning text, section 1210. It does make a distinction between the kinds of Coney Island style, like roller coasters and rides. And so those are into a separate use. So I think it's on here. Yeah, they're both in section 1210. They're newly defined terms. So I'm happy to answer any more detailed questions, but that's kind of my 30 seconds.
Yeah, I have a follow-up on that, Matt, because we are actually currently dealing with a amusement ride in our district, which we consider to be a non-permitted use. The applicant got away with it by claiming that it's an accessory use to a hotel.
That's right.
You guys actually did concur with DOB. We strongly object. We believe that, there's nothing accessory in a amusement ride, and you have many hotels throughout the world who don't have amusement rides. So now that this use would be permitted, I think we would love to see more specific language because, does it count towards FAR? And I think this was also a big question with this particular proposal where basically they were saying, well, it doesn't count towards FAR, which is entirely against every principle of the zoning resolution. But furthermore, is there going to be a little bit more refinement? Because I think we're fine with the notion of an arcade and laser tag and experiential amusement. And I think that, the whole amusement ride or nice little loophole that will allow to put stuff so that you get a taller building becomes a whole different problem.
Yeah, I hear you and I see the distinction. And so what I would say on this one is this is the kind of feedback we want. We want you to provide these recommendations on this proposal, having more refinement around the terms, being more clear about the intent. We want to allow for the kinds of businesses I described. And I think it's a much more gray area for you all to think about sort of where that line is between when something is experiential and when something, in your view, is not something you would like to have in your district. So I welcome your feedback on this in particular, since I'm very familiar now. I wasn't actually, at the time this proposal was created, we had no idea that this thrill ride, accessory thrill ride was being proposed. And then it came to us at the 11th hour, like, oh, okay. That I understand why they made the determination they did. I also understand why you disagree with that determination. It's in that sort of ambiguity that I think refinement is a good solution to address.
Yeah, okay. I have another question about the mixed use buildings. Currently mixed use is permitted, but now you're saying that the commercial portion can go anywhere. And I see lots of problems stemming from.
So a bit of clarification on this then, perhaps to assuage your concerns. What this proposal refers to specifically are the stacking rules that we have, that in some districts, particularly in more East Midtown, you can have residential and commercial within a building, and you can have commercial above residential, you can have commercial on the same floor as residential, but in other places you cannot do that. And what we've heard is that this is limiting in two separate ways. So I'll describe the new construction way first, where if you want to build a building that contains both residences and commercial uses, you always have to go commercial, then residential, and you don't have the ability to have, say, commercial on the ground floor, some residential, and then on the top floor maybe have a restaurant or something like that. So that is not allowed in our zoning today. In a residential building, it is allowed next door in a commercial building that's fully commercial, even though they're in the same district. So that's the new construction thing we're trying to solve. Again, already allowed in East Midtown. We've seen some good success with that. But the existing is where I want to focus on, because what we've heard in continuing to talk with folks about office conversions is that when you are partially converting a building, the stacking rules are one of the many, many regulations that can get in the way of office to residential conversions. And we are not addressing directly in this proposal the ability to create new housing. There's a whole other text amendment for housing, but there's this one little place of overlap where the stacking rules, which we're addressing here, help to, in concert with other rules, enable, say, one elevator bank of an office building to convert to another use while the rest of it stays as is. So it's a tool that's useful both for existing buildings and for new ones. There's a lot of safeguards we put in place for separation required for uses completely, separate elevators, separate entrances, and then we have very clear and strict sound attenuation standards built into the zoning itself, because we know that when we're introducing residential and non-residential on the same floor or even in close proximity, noise can travel. And so we have built into the zoning, in working with DOB and working with Department of Environmental Protection, some pretty, they're pretty novel and new, but strict standards for sound attenuation.
Okay. Other questions? Yeah, Aaron.
So just really quickly, I have a couple, but going back to proposal number one, right? So you made a point of saying in CB5, there's 990 vacant storefronts, but then you said that proposal one doesn't really affect our district.
Yeah.
So nothing here addresses, like you use that stat, but then nothing here actually addresses that 990 vacant stores. I just want to clarify that point.
Yeah, and thanks for the opportunity to clarify, because proposal one, while it is perhaps the most narratively clear and direct, actually refers to non-conformance of storefronts that exist in residence districts. I would argue that proposals 2 through 18 all help to address vacancy in storefronts and above the ground floor through the many, many different ways that our zoning is holding back the ability for businesses to easily locate and expand.
Okay, I would argue against that, that's fair. So on number 3, so we talked about cannabis with agriculture, but is item number 3 in terms of bakery, roaster, would a grow farm production space as part of a cannabis retail store be part of proposal 3 as well, in terms of having production and retail space in the same area as if the same for coffees or bakeries? Or is that strictly agriculture separate? I guess I'm looking at other examples. I was gonna ask you if cannabis applied to 3.
It's a great question, in part because I don't actually believe the rulemaking is complete on that interpretation yet. So what is currently happening is the state is going through a process of releasing guidance for each of the, I think it's like 12. There are a lot of cannabis license types. And in order to have, I think it's called a micro business. That might not be the right term, but there's one where they're essentially saying you can do production, you can do processing, and you can do retail. My understanding, and we can get back to you to verify this, is that you have to get multiple license types in order to do that kind of activity. So already you're setting yourself up to a really high bar to get that license. Now, when it comes to being able to locate one of these businesses, the rules we've put in place for proposal 3, I think will make it very difficult for an illicit business to set up shop, in part because you need to meet clear environmental standards that are certified by the state. So you have to not be doing anything that would create air quality concerns that you have to register with the state. That's a rule we have in our zoning today for any place where you have light industrial uses in proximity to residences in our city's mixed use industrial areas. So that rule exists. We're extending that in proposal 3. Then we're also adding an additional venting requirement where you have to meet the mechanical code in the city, as well as anything that the state would provide. So for any sort of food or beverage processor, you have to meet the state ag and markets venting requirements, as well as the mechanical code, excuse me, it's late, venting requirements. And so if you meet all of those standards, then you are allowed to locate, but it's only for business types that are specifically defined within the zoning. So I think this is my hedging, because honestly, the rules haven't been finalized yet, so I don't have a firm answer for you. But there are so many safeguards we put in place for these kinds of businesses to locate that if someone is having to meet those safeguards in order to open the space to physically be able to get their C of O, then they would essentially be having to do the legal process in order to do that, because of all the different ways that they need cross sign off from other city and state agencies in order to open. Does that make sense? I'm trying to give you a straight answer, but it is admittedly very complicated.
No, it does, because I think, that totally makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead, Aaron.
So just one more, so with points number 9 and 10, I'm just sort of, when we hear cabaret and dance clubs and dancing, and then we hear amusements, I immediately think of like, is the vision here to, like, are we gonna see more, let's say, adult entertainment spaces? So your definition of amusements is very vague. So if we're talking about cabaret, bars, clubs, cabaret, amusements, what's the vision there? Are we,
Yeah.
are we likely to see more,
Peep
you know, strip clubs, peep shows? You know, you could call it experiential, but like what relaxation of those rules?
Adult entertainment is an entirely separate regulated use within zoning, and it's entirely separate. It's separate from both nightlife and separate from amusements. It is regulated separately. We are not proposing any changes whatsoever to those regulations as they currently are. And so we are not, they're entirely separate, and it becomes a question of enforcement. So if there is, again, any sort of illicit activity that is happening that is not allowed, that is where we work with DOB. But when it comes to adult entertainment, that's where we work with the Mayor's Office of Special Enforcement and the NYPD in these instances. So I just want to be very clear. Proposals 9 and 10 do not expand where adult entertainment is allowed.
Okay, no, thank you.
I have a question.
Yeah, Nancy.
Is there some legal case, history on the, definition of amusements? Because I can just imagine, someone coming in and challenging this word amusements, and broadening the definition, beyond what we all want it to be. That would be my concern. In other words, there needs to be case law on that to support that particular definition. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think your suggestion makes sense. What I would suggest, though, is that very few existing uses in our zoning have the kind of case law you're describing. But what we do rely on are interpretations from Department of Buildings, interpretations from other cities in particular that have similar types of zoning. So it's not case law, but we do an awful lot of work in trying to make sure that the definitions that we have are both based on what exists in zoning today. So if you look at the definition we have for amusements and recreation facilities, it includes a lot of uses that currently exist, which gives DOB a sense of, okay, this is like something else. But it also points to things that are existing business types in our city today, that are common in our city today, that are like the business types defined in zoning, but they aren't currently defined. So those are where things like laser tag and escape rooms come into play, because DOB right now is making zoning determinations that things are allowed and they're allowed as accessory. And these are not defined uses in our zoning. So what we're trying to do is give DOB more clarity to draw that line on what is an amusement and what is not an amusement. So I think going back to the chair's earlier point in question, we want your feedback on these proposals, all of them. We want your feedback on this one specifically because we know that this is a place where you've had some concerns in the recent past, and you also have some experience in this topic. But I also would argue with Proposal 10, not all 18 proposals benefit your district equally. But I would argue from my perspective, Proposal 10 is among the most beneficial to your district. When you think about what is in demand for retail space, it is experiential businesses. We hear this from business improvement districts up and down Manhattan, but specifically in Midtown, that demand for these kinds of businesses is increasing at a time when there is some of the highest vacancy in your district of anywhere in the city. And so it is recognizing that there's an opportunity here to meet with some of these kinds of business types that are not currently allowed.
Any other questions? I think it's really getting late, and I think our attention span. CJ, do you have a question?
Yeah, just a quick one. Are there any restrictions on the type of life sciences companies, like Vivarium, like if you're coming in and building a vivarium, or if you're coming in with a rare disease biotech? Like, are there any restrictions on those types of companies or not?
So for life sciences, the way that our zoning thinks about labs is really from the early 60s, and we've recently, through a zoning interpretation memo, tried to update that language. But the language for laboratories still says you have to be medical or dental. It still says you can manufacture teeth, but it doesn't say what else you can do. And it's a very limiting definition. And going back to kind of my theme throughout tonight is whenever the terms are outdated or they're unclear, it leaves a lot up for interpretation, and that can make it hard for new innovative companies to grow. So our proposal for life sciences centers around two things. The first is to modernize that terminology for a lab and say that if you're a lab, so long as you don't have that potential for environmental hazards, you are okay to locate in any office setting. And Department of Buildings has interpreted that to mean you are a non-production laboratory in their building code. So that's section 427 of the building code. And it goes into very specific detail on the volume of hazardous materials and the kinds of activities and the kinds of research that can be done in a non-production laboratory. So we have pretty clear regulations for what we want to enable. And it's a matter of trying to codify that current interpretation, which is what Proposal 8 seeks to do.
Thanks.
Okay, that's very good question. I appreciate the clarification. I think we're gonna need a lot of help understanding Proposal 18. I don't think we can do it tonight.
Yeah.
I think we're just like exhausted our brain juice, and probably yours as well. I cannot imagine that you have to take this show on the road to 59 community boards.
This is in fact my third presentation today. I was testifying at the Bronx Borough President this afternoon, and then I gave a presentation to the Staten Island delegation this afternoon, and now I'm here.
Wow.
And that's today.
It is, I really want to acknowledge the amount of work that is going on in, with the Department of City Planning. And we only see what we see. And I know a lot is happening in CB5, but, you're dealing with two citywide zoning text changes, for economic opportunity and for housing opportunity, a full rezoning of Midtown South, a gaming facility zoning tax amendment. You guys are really very, very busy, and we appreciate all the work that you do and all the communication that you have with us, and we don't take it for granted, and it's really much appreciated. So I just wanted to state it for the record. Really much gratitude. I think we can leave it at that. We know where to find you guys, and we're gonna have a lot of questions. As I said, I think Proposal 18 is super complex, and we need to make sure we really fully understand what it covers. We can do some of that on our own. We can exchange some emails, and we definitely want to take you up on your offer to come back in December. I realize actually that I'm about to commit a mistake, and I don't want to commit a mistake. I need to open up to members of the public if they want to ask any questions. So I'm going to do that right now, and apologies for almost forgetting. So if there are any members of the public who have a question or a comment on this particular item, you can use the raise hand function to indicate that you wish to speak. Any questions or comments? Okay, so seeing none, we can now say that we followed all the procedural requirements of these meetings. I see, sorry, Barbara has her hand up. I'm so sorry. Barbara, you are permitted.
Thank you, Leila. Thank you so much. And Matt, thank you so much. And I'm going to try and be brief because everyone's exhausted. The Garment District Alliance supports the City of Yes for Economic Opportunity proposal. The proposed changes will modernize New York's zoning regulations, support small businesses and our commercial quarters so that they align with how our neighborhoods are now. We increasingly realize that mixed-use neighborhoods permit more adaptive reuse and permits a commercial environment that is more pedestrian-friendly and acknowledges our current living patterns. Embracing this evolution and putting the plan into place will allow our neighborhoods to be more dynamic. There were three things that came up in the conversation this evening. I just wanted Matt call to your attention or ask, I don't know the answer to. Is there avenue for DCP to consider how to address illegal ground floor retailers such as weed shops. We realize that the state is going to regulate legal weed shops, but is there some mechanism within zoning, 500 feet from a school, 500 feet from, a church, 1,000 feet from a harm reduction entity? That's number one. Number two, you mentioned in your proposal the long blank wall. We have 3 in the Garmin District, the Port Authority, Verizon, the Parole Board. I bet you don't have jurisdiction over any of those. Nevertheless, they're half a block long and really have created dangerous sort of situations on those blocks. And finally, we've spoken with DCP on numerous occasions. Again, I don't know if there's a mechanism here or not, but the whole idea of fair share for LULUs, locally unwanted land use. There are certain neighborhoods that are oversaturated with social service entities, harm reduction entities, transportation centers, which bring in their own cohort of individuals looking for illicit amusement. So is there a mechanism to somehow codify the concept of fair share in a zoning process, which means it goes through a public process and a community board? Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you, Barbara. I appreciate I've spoken with you and the other folks at the Garmin Center Alliance a number of times in the development of these proposals. So I'm thank you for joining us this evening and voicing that support, but also I want to make sure I answer your questions. So starting with cannabis, and I touched on this a little bit, so I'll expand just a tiny bit since I know it's getting late. Part of the challenge that we're facing, candidly, is that a lot of the businesses that are selling cannabis illicitly are doing that, but they're also selling a lot of other items. So it's hard to make the case that they're a cannabis shop only. And from a zoning perspective, it's therefore pretty much impossible to say all stores that might sell a little bit of illicit cannabis are not to be within 100 feet of X. So we've looked at this because we wish we had a solution in zoning, but we just don't. And so what I would say is, and I heard this from the head of Cannabis NYC last week myself, super confirmed it. She said the best thing you can do is 311 because they are creating a database that they are then sending over to the PD and the sheriff's office to start to go through and crack down on these businesses. They're not doing it again as fast as folks would like. They're probably not doing it all at once, but what they are doing is starting with the 311 process and going through that enforcement where we do have the teeth legally in order to crack down on this illicit activity. So it is not a zoning solution. We've tried to think if there is something here, and there just isn't, because there's no way to separate that illicit use from any other business that's selling any other retail good. So that's number one. Number two, on long blank walls, we hear you. This is precisely why we want these proposals in place, because there are so many parts of our city where you want to assume that a new building has a design-oriented intention, but many of them just don't. It's an afterthought, or it's only, I'm here for the first part of the proposal, it's only through encouragement and feedback from community boards through a discretionary process that they get to a design. But so often the zoning with an as-of-right framework can't do that. So that's what we want to get to, is where there is mitigation for these long blank walls. If it's an existing building, the rules apply only if there's substantial alteration. So only if they're going to DOB and going through a process. Yep. So I can't say whether those are in the plans for any of the 3 sites you mentioned, but if they were, then these rules would apply. So the idea is you can't make things worse than they currently are. Okay. But happy to go into more detail and talk about specific cases. And then lastly, on fair share, I don't have a good answer for you tonight, but I'll take it back and continue to talk about it with the team. I know that it's not something that only you have raised, other folks have raised it in the city as well. So I'll continue to just bring that back to our folks and continue to voice your concerns, because I hear you and I understand why you have those concerns.
Great.
Well, thank you for all your.
And thank you, Barbara, for raising these issues. I think it's very informative for the committee board to hear your perspective. So we really appreciate, and apologies that I almost missed on opening up the public session. So yikes. And I'm glad that you stayed until the end. Thank you for your patience. Are there any other members of the public who wish to speak to this particular application? Okay, so I don't see any other hands going up. Thank you again so much to all for joining us tonight. The meeting is adjourned, and we will see you again in December. Thank
Ezra,
you.
feel better.
Well, he did a great job. Yeah.
Thank you.